All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Mala Kumar. I'm the Director of Tech for Social Good on the GitHub Social Impact team. It's my honor to welcome you here today to our event centering women's equity in digital technology. This is the first of two parallel events that GitHub is hosting for the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. We're joining you here from New York City in the beautiful Microsoft UN Affairs office. So I want to welcome everybody here in person and those joining us virtually online. So the priority theme of CSW 67 is, and I'm going to read it from my paper because it's quite long, innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. Now, as the name suggests, at GitHub Tech for Social Good, we deeply understand the importance of equality, equity, and inclusivity at every stage of the technology lifecycle, from conception and design to implementation to deployment and scale. Since Tech for Social Good launched in 2019, our work has engaged more than 35,000 people globally and has filled critical research and programmatic gaps in technology for the social sector. But our work would not be possible without the incredible individuals and organizations that work at the very core of these issues, often with the world's most vulnerable populations and difficult and intense contexts. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome five esteemed panelists, Vidishta, Ifi, Stephanie, Hera, and Tarunima, who have built tech solutions to address some of the toughest challenges that disproportionately affect people who identify as women and girls. That's access to tech skills, gender-based violence, and online harassment and bullying. Today, we'll hear about their work and concrete steps that software developers, project managers, thematic experts, and really anyone can take in order to support their work. And later in the program, I'll also announce an exciting new Tech for Social Good program. Now, before we get to these incredible panelists in our announcement, it's my honor to welcome today's keynote speaker, Shelley McKinley. Shelley is a vice president at Microsoft and the chief legal officer at GitHub. Prior to coming to GitHub in July 2021, Shelley led the technology and corporate responsibility group in the Microsoft corporate, external, and legal affairs team. I've gotten to know Shelley a bit over the past year, and I can say firsthand that she's an outspoken advocate of women's rights. And today she'll be talking to us about the timely topic of the role of artificial intelligence, or AI for short, in women's equity. Please welcome Shelley.
Mala, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks for just really developing and leading and creating this wonderful and timely opportunity to discuss these issues. Also want to give a warm shout out to our panelists. We'll get to hear a little bit more from them later, and to Microsoft, of course, for hosting us at this amazing venue. I'm just thrilled and humbled to be here today. As Mala mentioned, I've worked in the social impact space for a while and have had the opportunity to lead teams at GitHub and at Microsoft that focus on social issues. And particularly, I'm just so really passionate about women's issues. It wasn't necessarily something I started with when I was young. I didn't know I was going to have the experience that I've had in my career to be able to meet and interact with so many women who have lifted each other up. So I just love doing this work, and I just think it's amazingly important. So I will say I am super excited and becoming, as Mala would say, a massive fangirl of our panelists. And I'm excited to become a massive fangirl of other people in this room, because it's so great to be in a space with people who are committed to the same things, to advancing women's equity. As Mala mentioned, our event could not be more timely. And that's because we are currently living in what is one of the biggest inflection points, probably of our lifetimes in terms of technology. In the past months, we found ourselves really kind of inundated with broad scale AI technology. We're starting to tangibly see what this technology can do. But this inflection point needs the full consideration, needs the full participation, and it needs the leadership of women to succeed. To set the stage a little bit on where we are on this journey, it's important to understand while we're seeing these broad tools come out, AI is actually already incorporated in many of the things that we do, just not in a way that we see it as much as we are now. You're going to be amazed by the many, many ways it already affects your daily life. And it's doing some great things to help stimulate creative thinking, to help advance creative expression, and to help people be more productive. A couple of the examples, voice-to-text AI is helping lines of communication open in remote parts of Ethiopia, especially as the COVID pandemic has really inhibited the ability for face-to-face surveys for things like nutritional programs. AI-powered satellite imagery is helping humanitarian response identify critical areas where help is needed and to deploy resources more quickly and efficiently to those areas. So what was once deemed science fiction is now becoming really woven in the fabric of absolutely everything we do. So as we watch this happen, there is no question that we have also all heard about many legitimate concerns about how AI impacts particularly underrepresented groups and women. Many of you probably saw in about 2018, there was a study that came out of MIT that gave us a real pause for concern. It was some really significant, staggering results around the ability of facial recognition to correctly identify people. And what that study found was that 0.8% of light-skinned men were misidentified. 0.8%. 34.7% of dark-skinned women were misidentified by commercial AI systems. So we know there's a massive challenge and opportunity that we have to do better. We've also seen things like, obviously, I think many people have probably seen the reports about HR systems and interviewing processes and how those disproportionately negatively impact women and underrepresented groups. We've got a lot to learn. We've got a lot to learn on how we correct the technology, how we move forward with the technology, and how we ensure that AI is unbiased in its results and does not further exacerbate entrenched social inequalities. Why do we care if it's this hard? We care because AI has a massive, massive opportunity to leapfrog what I would see as years, centuries of inequities among the genders and among all underrepresented people. So it's critical that if we are going to deploy AI, that we do it well and we figure out these hard problems. So let me just talk a moment about what I see in terms of how AI can help women. Let's maybe start by one of the things that I am guaranteeing that everybody in this room has probably presented on in front of a conference, and that is the gender gap in STEM. It's something we've been grappling with as a technology industry since technology started. It's something that, as I've been in the technology industry about 20 years, I feel like it's Groundhog Day. I wake up, I go to a conference, we're talking about the same leaky pipeline for women in STEM that we've been talking about for 20 years, and we are not fixing it fast enough. I do feel like I'm starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and that is through many, many things. One of them is AI. Now, AI is not the answer for everything. Let's just be really clear. I was just talking with our colleague from Georgetown in the room, and about how, there are basic things that need to happen before AI can be used in many places. You have to have water, you have to have electricity, you have to have access to technology. So there's so many things. So I just want to make sure people understand it's not the silver bullet for everything. We've got so many things to fix, but I'm going to focus a little bit on this. When you think about tools at GitHub, we released a tool called GitHub Copilot. And what that is, it's an AI-powered developer tool, and it's helping coders code, I'll just be conservative here, about 50% faster. Because what developers do is they learn from each other. And this is what AI is helping power that learning so that it comes faster. You're not going out of the developer workflow. You're getting your work done more quickly. The boring work you're getting done more quickly, and you're able to then focus on the creative tasks. And why is that important? It's important because we also know that the research shows that women and girls fall out of STEM education at a massive rate, and much of that, or at least one of the factors of that, is that it's not creative or interesting enough. And there's all these boring tasks. I mean, some people find those boring tasks really interesting. There are many people that do. I do. I was like a math geek. I love math. But if you can harness the power of all of these creative women and girls and just move them to where they're not doing repetitive tasks, AI has the opportunity to do things like that. Another way that AI is helping deal with the gender gap is when we think about where we are today, and we think about bringing girls and women along in the educational pipeline from, let's call it from birth through college education. How long is that going to take if we started today? We haven't started, but if we really fixed the gender gap today, we've got 20 years to go until you see girls and women being equally represented in the tech sector. Tools like Copilot also offer the opportunity to drastically accelerate women today. so we can bring in more women, more adult women into the pipeline. I can't say this today, but I would say I will hope to be able to stand in front of you all in a few years and say that the most powerful and the most common language for computer programming is English. It's French. It's Spanish. It is whatever natural language you wish to code in. And it's advances like these that happen in AI that will ultimately drive even more adult women into being creators, coders in air quotes here themselves, because you should be able to, in a few years, code in your natural language, bringing more and more women into the field and really narrowing that gender gap in STEM. So in addition to STEM, there's a lot more issues that we need to solve, and many that also will be helped by AI. For example, things like voice assistants. The growth in these areas, when you think about literacy levels and the ability to communicate and having voice to text assistance, voice recognition can shape the experience for women, helping people engage with the government or with public services by spoken rather than by written means. We're also seeing things like access to healthcare. There's a great example of a company called Nehemiah Thermolytics that is bringing mammogram technology, low cost, high accuracy mammogram technology based on AI to women across India, 150 locations right now. Imagine bringing this type of preventative life-saving care very broadly. We can do that with things like artificial intelligence. So across industries, we're continuing to see these AI challenges that are met with opportunities. We have to focus on both. There's no way to do this unless we focus both on the challenges. We understand why we're spending so much time on the challenges and how those unlock the opportunities that we all have ahead of us. And it's going to take all of us. It's not just private companies. It's not just civil society. It's not just government actors. There's no way to do this unless we all work together, because we all have very specific and unique roles to play. When I think about the role of companies, which is the role that I'm in, we bring together our programs that are focused on issues. We have, as Mala leads our Tech for Social Impact program that sits in our overall social impact work. And that's at the forefront of what we do as a company in these areas. And what she's been focused on and what that team has been focused on is doing things like partnering with the World Health Organization to bring the first ever open source program office to the UN. Why is that important? Why does the UN need to use open source? Open source is the model for what we all need to do to make a difference. It builds on other people. We all build on each other and we work together. And so with having an open source office and pushing that out through the UN can use the fundamental infrastructure that is part of open source and build on that and contribute back to it. That's an important thing about open source. So leading things like the introduction of an office for open source in the UN is critical, I think, to helping advance the UN mission. So we're really excited about that work. We've worked hand in hand with the UN on it. It's not something just GitHub's done. It takes two partners on that. We also, in the private sector, we use one of our other most valuable assets, our people. Because behind every company, I want people to remember there are people. There are people who care. There are people who want to do this work, and there are people who volunteer and give their time. And as a company, we also promote that. We give people time off to be able to pursue volunteer opportunities, and we organize them. And so our skills-based volunteering program, led out of the social impact team, has 200, as we call them, hubbers. We're active in the last year, engaged in building rapid risk assessments and creating the UNDP's development compass. We have the opportunity to do more. The team's currently exploring how do we use more AI in what we do so that we can accelerate our efforts. Even today, Mala is going to announce a little bit more about something that she's been up to that we're excited about. I won't give away too much about that. I'll let you, I'm not going to steal your thunder. And of course, we also one of the nice things about GitHub being part of Microsoft is that we are able to leverage Microsoft's responsible AI program that's really industry leading, and investing in research, policy, and engineering to ensure that systems perform fairly, accurately, and safely. So there's, as I mentioned, a ton of work that we need to do in that area, and Microsoft's been a real leader in that, and we get to access that, which is one of the great things about being part of that family. The social sector has a real critical role here to play. You're going to hear from, as I mentioned, some amazing panelists that I'm a real fangirl of who are working in this area. Each of them are addressing challenges that are ranging from gender-based bias to strengthening the pipeline for women across STEM. And the government is also a key driver in our efforts. The government owns education. We still need to work hand in hand together with the government to ensure that the education gets to the right places. They have the technological background that they need. We can help accelerate those efforts. We've got to work together. They also need to ensure that there are responsible policies that spur and spark innovation, and they don't stifle innovation. I've got 1 minute remaining. Thank you, Mala. I'll speed it up here. But they do this in a way that's keeping society safe. So these two things need to go hand in hand. Realizing the opportunities for women requires this multi-stakeholder approach, and that's one of the reasons it's so important that we've converged here today in this room to talk about these issues. It's the defining technology of our lifetime, probably most of us. And I do know that if we navigate it well, we will be able to unlock the opportunities that we have with it. So together we have got the opportunity to help shape how AI works for women. And we do know that when women do well, everyone does better. So with that, thank you very much. Looking forward to the panel discussions.
One of the points that I really wanted to talk about is just the idea that you talked about how AI is ubiquitous, because I think a lot of people in the social sector have been using AI for the past 10 years in a lot of their work, but I don't think it's quite evident how ubiquitous it really is. And that's not just in high income countries like here in the United States or in Europe, but also technologies we see in low and middle income countries. So when we talk about women's equity in AI, what exactly does that mean?
Well, it means that women need to fully participate, whether that's from the creation of the technology, which we absolutely need to make it more equitable. Like, we're not going to be able to sit around and rely on a bunch of men to create technology that's going to be equitable for women. So we've got to be fully participating in the creation and utilization of technology. What does that mean? We also need to then have access to be able to do that. We need to have education. We need to have access. And so those are the key areas, and they interrelate to drive women's equity in technology. And today there are many areas where we don't, as we all know. When you talk about, the United States, Europe, you've got a lot more equity in the access. But when you go to places I've always been in my travels over my time in Microsoft, when I would go to Africa and I would see what people were doing with technology, we were working on some broadband connectivity. I really do like men as well. I'm just going to say that I'm not against men. But I would go to a few places where we were doing a broadband installation, and I can't tell you how many times I visit with these guys and they'd be like, "Oh, did you get your broadband access? How does it look?" And they'd be like, "Oh, it's great. I'm watching some cartoons." And then I went to visit this woman named Anne, and I was like, "So," she didn't even have internet yet. And I said, "So you want internet? You're looking forward to getting internet?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "What are you going to do with it?" She goes, "I'm going to use it to make my business more effective." And I'm like, I didn't know, not unscripted. And it's unbelievable when you get technology in the hands of women, what they do with it. And I'm not saying men don't do good things with technology, don't get me wrong, but I will tell you, every single woman that I talked to, it was always about making things better for themselves, for their families, for their communities. And it's just, I don't know, maybe we're just wired that way.
No, I think that's a really interesting point, because one of the points that I don't see in the media covered a lot is that AI can really shift the way that code is written, right? The way that we interact with technology and code. So anybody who's a software developer now knows it's about syntax. You leave one bracket out and then the entire application could crash. but we might be moving to an era where you just have to be creative and explain your ideas well, and then something will be able to code that for you. So can you talk more about that? Like, what's the future of creativity when it comes to software development and code and AI?
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. I think it becomes something that everyone can do. And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be software developers who are still working on, underlying code. I mean, there's people working on mainframe today. Can you believe that? There's still people working on mainframe. So it's not like AI is not coming for your jobs, coders today. It is going to make it much more efficient, much more fun, much more effective, and it's also going to bring an immense number of new people into the area. And I think that's the opportunity that we have. Let's unlock everyone's creative capabilities. And you don't need to go from kindergarten through secondary education to college to be able to code something. You get to use technology really, with some basic understanding. And when it becomes actually English, actually French, actually Spanish, actually whatever language, then wow, can you imagine how fast you can unlock the creative potential of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of comes into my next question, which is what we do hear in the media all the time, and Microsoft's definitely driving this, the idea that we're at an inflection point with AI. So what does that mean exactly in the context of women's equity, especially?
For me, it means the time is now. We can no longer wait. We can no longer wait to ensure that AI works for women and that women work with AI. So it's happening. As we've talked about, it's happening now. There's already a lot of AI, but it's never become as tangible as it is today. There's no doubt that just the advances we've seen, the headlines have been grabbed over the last few weeks. It's coming to us. It's here. It's coming in a much more rich and tangible way, and we need to be very focused on ensuring that it works for everyone. So that's why it's a shift that we have not seen in our lifetimes that we're going to see right now. Everything will start having AI functionality in it.
Well, Microsoft and GitHub are obviously at a unique place with AI and social good. So can you talk to us about what do you think the role of the social sector will be? Because you mentioned the role of governments and, the public sector. How does the social sector really play into this work?
Social sector is key. We can do a lot as a technology company, but we don't know what all the issues are. We can only, when we come together and learn what's needed, who needs it, where it's needed, what are the problems you're trying to solve. All that information and all that work comes from the social sector. The social sector also deploys it. So we have one piece, which is a technology platform, and we have people that help work on that, and we have people that work with others, but it takes an entire ecosystem because one company alone is going to make, let's just say, a half of a drop in a massive bucket. And the social sector has been working in this area for generations. So to think that the technology industry can come in and just decide what's best for people around the world is totally wrong. You're going to fail. I mean, we've all seen examples of that. And I think, it's the social sector has to be out front, has to play, and has to be leaders also in thinking about how they can adopt technology to accelerate their work, because it can only happen when it comes together.
Great. Okay, my last question for you, it's going to get a slightly more personal. So a lot of people don't realize that you are our chief legal officer, which means you are a lawyer, which means you're not a software developer. So for all of the women in this room who are not software developers, but who want to effectively engage with AI and women's equity, what advice would you impart with them or to them based on your career and your experiences?
Well, I would say if I can do it, anybody can do it. I mean, I'm a lawyer. Like, what do I know about technology? I mean, you just have to deploy your curiosity, your openness, your willingness, your passion. Mala will probably remember a few months ago, I was like, I'm going to demo GitHub Copilot for all of Microsoft's legal department. I mean, the last time I coded, I was doing Fortran in the basement of the sciences building. I was a math person. But I don't know anything about coding really, other than I can kind of talk about it from a legal perspective. And so, I dug in, I figured out how to set up a code space. I figured out how to deploy Copilot. Yes, did I have help? I asked my friends. That's what you should all do too. Ask your friends, ask your colleagues, ask your counterparts to help you. And I think that's the beauty of what's coming with this, is that it will be an opportunity for everyone. And so I think I got off a little off topic from what you asked me, but I think if we dig in and we work together, and if, be curious and don't be afraid, like people of my generation, in 10, 15 years, I don't know, they'll probably all be retired, and maybe nobody else is going to be afraid of technology anymore. Like but well, we didn't know how to. I mean, I grew up with computers in the house, but like my parents didn't, and so I've been tech support for so many years for them. But digital natives are in the workforce today, and that's not ubiquitous across the world. But I think we're going to get over this like, I don't know, sectoralization of, or this just vertical depth of technology, and it's just going to be spread everywhere. And I think that gives everyone massive opportunities to really take part in this, and to ensure that technology becomes something we're all working with to help accelerate all of the great work we're doing.
Great, thanks so much. So we're out of time with our conversation with the keynote, as I cleverly titled it. So we're now going to move on to panel one. So please welcome Fedish Jafuro, founder of Code to Inspire, Ife Ikema, Senior Enterprise Integration Engineer at Flutterwave, and Stephanie Coker, Senior Consultant at TCC Group. Shelley will be your moderator, so I'm going to step down.
Hello.
Now I got you on the hot seat. You're a monitoring and evaluation expert. All right. To set the stage, can you give us a global perspective on how access to technology, skills, and jobs compares along gender lines, and how people who identify as girls and women have fared to boys and men?
What a monumental task, right? If I were to summarize, and there has been a lot of research on this recently, and I should just mention, as a monitoring and evaluation professional, what that means is that I work on a lot of research analysis. I'm on the analytics, social sector analytics side, if you can call it that way. And what has recently happened, you can think of access, you can think of the gender gap in four ways, right? You can think of access as the first, you can think of participation, which is the use and the skills to actually use digital technology. You can think of it in terms of what Shelley mentioned before, which is in participation in STEM field and the workforce. You can also think of it in terms of leadership, right? Because leadership is a very different perspective of thinking about how the gender gap works. So if you think about it across all of these dimensions, in terms of access, women are and girls are continue to lag behind. 62% of men and boys are connected around the world compared to 57% as of last year. But when you think when you step away from internet connectivity and you think about mobile phone access, which in most parts of the world is really the key to getting real access, right? Mobile phone, there is a gap there as well with mobile phone access between women and girls and men and boys. And so when you also think about participation, about skills and usage, I think women and girls are uniquely disadvantaged, particularly as it relates to making online spaces safe for women to participate and girls to participate in. I think that's a really important topic. I'm really excited to hear from my fellow panelists about this, but I think that that's also a really important aspect of this, is not just the access, but making it safe. And in terms of, as you talk about access to the workforce, right? This is an area where in developing countries, this is a huge gap, but it's also a huge gap in countries that have higher economic GDPs. And so this is an area where we're all really still struggling and working to bridge. And so as time goes on and as we see the data out there, as we see what's actually being done, this is an area that's still really important. And from a research perspective, from monitoring and evaluationist perspective, I think what's interesting is that you mentioned some of the other applications of technology and use, right, tools, is that there has been a lot of study on using tools for things such as access to microfinance, access to health apps, access to geography technology, access to agricultural technology, all of these things. But research has been done on how this access, right? You're targeting livelihoods, you're targeting economic impact, but these interventions are also helping to bridge the gender gap, because women are typically at the forefront of economic livelihoods for their families. They're typically at the forefront of health for their families. They're typically at the forefront of all of these areas. And so one of the key things I think is I think the UN in particular has been pushing this for a long time, is disaggregated data and research that helps us to be able to understand better and tell the story of what is actually working across the world in bridging that gap and that divide. So, I mean, I'm really excited I know my fellow panelists also talk about the other two aspects, but super excited to be here. And thank you, Mala, for inviting me.
It just, just everything you said just reminds me of why it's so important that the social sector and the platform technology companies work together, because the mobile phone piece, like, how do you design these platforms so that they work with mobile phones? Because you can get the internet there, you get the electricity there, and then you have to have a device that works. And it's just such a layered challenge. All right, Freshta, you are on the screen behind us. We see you there. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
You're the founder of Code to Inspire, an organization with the mission to empower Afghan women through technology and education and jobs. Tell us about the organization and why this cause is so important when it comes to women's equity in digital technology.
Yes, well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As a refugee born, I was born in Iran as a refugee, and I think when you're born as a refugee, there are certain challenges and discriminations that you're facing. And to me, accessing education and going to school was one of the challenges that my family and a lot of other refugees are facing. And I think from such a young age, I understood the value of education and that no human beings should be discriminated just because of their indifferences and the circumstances that they have. And we moved to Afghanistan 2002, 1 year after the fall of Taliban, in Herat, where I got my bachelor in computer science. And then I went to Germany and I got my master's in computer science from Technical University of Berlin, and went back and taught as a computer science professor for 3 years in the university. So just, being a woman and studying computer science in Afghanistan, not only in a male-dominated field of study, but also in a very male-dominated culture, and even teaching that, I've understood that nothing has changed for the girls and women, especially talking about providing equal resources for them that can convert into job opportunities. The challenges such as verbal and sexual harassments that women face within the education and working spaces was a big issue. And the family wouldn't let their daughters, to travel and go to other part of the city or outside to work. So to me, I guess technology was the key element to be able to pass all those barriers, because once you have access to a laptop and internet and you do have the skill, you can easily connect to the outside world, in a safe environment, and work at home or in a safe place. That's why I established Code to Inspire as the first coding school for girls and women in Afghanistan, 2015. And our program is really 1 year after school program. We've educated more than 350 girls in our coding and graphic design classes. And with the data we had pre the Taliban takeover in August 21, 60 to 70% of our graduates found job in Afghanistan. And some of them were earning above income monthly salary, which is $150. So some of them would make double or triple than the men in the family. So for us, I think the element of the women being able to be one of the main breadwinner of the family, and be able to participate in the economic activities is a grassroots level of change. Because now once a girl would be able to bring money to the family, her voice would be heard more, because the family will see a value in case of investing on the girl's education. And then they would be a part of this decision-making process in the family. So there would be less violence against women. And for that reason, I think providing a safe space only for girls and women for free, make them feel comfortable and accessing to the technical skills, so that they would be able to work in a safe space and environment and get paid, was a reason for me to see how I can empower these young ladies and encourage a lot of women to join the tech and STEM in an early age.
Following up a little bit, can you just quickly talk a little bit about how the December 2022 decree in Afghanistan barring women from working in national, international, non-governmental organizations has impacted the situation?
Yes, so well, with the August 21, like everyone else from there, we had to close the school. And really, the first 3 months of our operation was very humanitarian. We wanted to help our students and families on the ground. But October 21, we started to restart our work. So we picked Google Classroom as the medium and we shifted all our curriculum to that, and we started distributing laptops and internet to our students, and we were able to bring back at least 90% of our students back to school by that time. However, last year, this time, the Taliban de facto administration said if any local NGO wants to continue their work, they can renew their work permit. So we applied for work permit renewal. It took about 5 months, a lot of challenges and back and forth with the Taliban administration, and we finally got the work permit. In August last year, we were able to actually reopen the school in person after 1 year. So we announced new classes. We had about 400 applicants registered. We took an entrance exam and we accepted 300 of them to our coding graphic design classes. Everything was going well. We had the school open, the girls were coming, but sadly last December, with the new announcement, as you said, with the ban on girls' education on university and extracurricular activities, and also with female employees working with NGOs, we had to close the school again for both reasons. But because we had a good experience online, we did the same thing with use Google Classroom and distributed laptops and purchased monthly internet packages for our students. So since then, we have all of our students working remotely and also continuing their classes online.
Oh wow, that's I mean, fascinating that you've been able to do that. That's great. Iffy. So Iffy, you're a software developer in Nigeria, and you're actively involved in the Hyperspace Africa initiative. Tell us about the work and what Hyperspace is doing to help young women and girls access skills and jobs.
Okay, yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, so Hyperspace is a non-profit organization that focuses only on providing the easiest learning technique to university students through traditional hackathons, right? Yeah, so this technique was actually like brought into life through a real life experience that I myself have experienced, right? When I was in university, I was privileged to be part of some communities, but I found out that the kind of learning we are getting there is actually not encouraging us to continue in the line of tech, right? Because tech is actually not that easy as they always say, right? But I was a huge beneficiary of one method that the Django guests actually have devised. That's like learning on the go. So after getting such opportunity from the Django guests, we came back and said that we need to replicate this, right? We found out that women are hugely underrepresented, right, in our community. And the method we at Hyperspace have put in place, like the mechanism that we are actually using to get more ladies to actually be part of tech, right? And also like a kind of pick a career path in tech, especially for people that are not in the tech related faculty. So as people like medicine students, people like nursing students, people from biological science and all of that, right? So we put a mechanism that will help them to learn on the go and also build an actual stuff. That's what we, the Hyperspace team, have come together, right? We believe solely well in learning and building on the go. I myself is a huge beneficiary of this method, right? And that has been working for us. Imagine that you are in a space where you come for a hackathon and you are going home feeling satisfied that you built something that is actually like working. You can be able to like show it to your friends and even showcase it on the internet, right? And this will actually help you to build your curiosity more, right? This is what we've been going around the university. So far, we've done evangelism in almost 10 universities in Nigeria, right? Yeah, we started at 2020 before COVID, and we were hugely impacted by this, and we have to take it virtually. But before COVID, we've been able to cover like 8 universities, and we've seen that to be a huge turn. That's why we have a lot of success stories from this, because they were able to kind of pick up learning on their own without needing much guidance, because we found out that normal tech meetup community, what we do is to just provide resources and not give them guidance. But when you kind of give them the support and allow them to learn and build something on the go, right? Take, for instance, somebody from medical sciences come for a meetup, and in the meetup, they were able to build something like a blog. As simple as it might be, right? It's actually a huge thing, because that will actually spark the curiosity of that person to explore more, even give the person like a huge problem searching skills, right? You'll be able to ask the right question. You'll be able to say, oh, I want this functionality to be on this blog. How can I do that? And with this, you know, you will see that you actually like your curiosity, your interest, we actually spark and grow, right? And you can be able to pick it up with little guidance and support from the community. You can be able to develop something and build yourself, and also like pick a career in tech. And another thing we've also done is to actually like do more advocacy on the relationship tech has with other disciplines. For example, we have been talking about AI and all of that, right? We software engineers can't just build these solutions alone without the help of people from other disciplines. Example, if you are building something that centers on a natural language, right, you need people from linguistics and the likes. If you are building health-related app, you need somebody that has huge knowledge in medical field. These are the things that we've done. We've actually like piloted to actually take those advocacy to people that feel that they don't have anything to do with tech. They see that tech is actually mainly for people in mathematics or computer science or tech dominated discipline. But no, we've been able to like kind of take that message to them and tell them that no, that there is no boundary in tech, that all of us can come together and build a solution for everybody.
Wow, thank you so much. So we've got just a little bit of time left, so we're going to do a little bit of a lightning round with our 3 panelists. Because one of the things that we, wanted to inspire here today is, what can we all do? I mean, Mala asked me that question, like what can people do? So I'm going to ask each of you to just give a quick thought on what concrete actions our audience can take. How can they engage, and what would you like to see? So I got about 1 minute for each of you. I'm gonna start here in the room with Stephanie.
All right, let's kick it off. So as a monitoring and evaluation professional, right, and let's start there. I've been proud and privileged to be a part of the Merle Center, which is one of the programs by the Tech for Social Good program at GitHub. And I mean, I'm listening to Iffy talk about how you don't need to be in the tech field, right, to now become a coder or a software developer. I'm not in the tech field, but I learned a lot about GitHub. I learned a lot about how to code. I already know how to code mostly from my research background, but now I have access to the behind the scenes. Now I know what it's like to be in the same spaces as software developers, right? Now I'm on I'm working with one of my colleagues, Bonnie Wolf. She's from the Code, she came from the Code for LA organization, working on social programs there. Now I'm on a natural learning program, natural language processing steering committee for M&E professionals, right? We're already in the game. We're trying to understand how this works, how we can apply it for the social sector. And so this really brings home the point that I think you're right. The inflection point is that everyone can now access this everyone can now be a player. You don't need to have the traditional skills that you would typically have needed to have 5-10 years ago. And spaces like GitHub, Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, like, are really, really helping to democratize technology.
It's amazing when we can unlock everyone's creativity, how many problems we can solve. Varsha, what are you going to weigh in with here on concrete actions?
So if you're looking for any company, organizations, or individuals that might be interested to join our team, because we are on the phase of scaling and expansion of our program within the entire Afghanistan, and we are going to launch an online platform both for education and job placement. And then second, job opportunities. Right now, the only thing that can help the girls and women of Afghanistan is a way to have an income so that they can support themselves and also family, and be empowered. So our girls are as talented as any other coders and graphic designers in the world. So any job that you can provide and give them not only will change their lives right now, but also it will change the community, and hopefully in a very longer term, it will help the future of Afghanistan. So anyone who might be interested, please do not hesitate to reach out, and we would be very happy to talk about it.
Iffy, to you.
Yeah, so can you hear me? Yeah, so
Yes.
we at Hyperspace, we appreciate volunteers. We need more people to help us to advocate for women equity, right? And then the discrimination, I forgot to talk about that one, right? In order for us to actually enhance the women technology scaling, right, we have to also kind of look at the gender bias and the discrimination that we get. A lot of people that actually pick interest, but they actually have witnessed one or two things from the community that makes them to withdraw. So all of these things are the things that we need from the audience. Like if you can get volunteers that can help us to do more advocacy, provide more resources for our community members, we greatly appreciate that.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to add one more thing as we close it out here on concrete steps, because I think it is incumbent upon every one of us in the room and upon all of your friends and all of your colleagues and everyone who's leaders in this space to mentor and be role models for other women and girls around the world. I mean, I've just been sitting here and been totally inspired and thinking how much I feel like I am getting mentored, and I'm seeing role models among the panelists sitting in the room. I mean, it's I love hearing how you're using GitHub, and like that inspires me. As Mala knows, sometimes I'm not the greatest on GitHub, but I'm getting there. But I'm getting there. But we can all do more to help other people, because when women do well, everyone does better. So thank you very much for the panelists. It's just amazing to hear from all of you. I really appreciate your time and just am so inspired by the work you are all doing.
So please welcome Hera Hussain, founder of Chain, and Tarunima Prabhakar, research lead and founder of Tattle. Okay, so let's start with the easy question. So Hera, Tarunima, thank you so much for being here. We'd love to hear about the incredible work that you've done. So Hera, can you tell us about your organization?
Yes, it will be my pleasure. So, hi everybody in the room and virtually. My name is Hera Hussain. I'm the founder and CEO of Chen, which is a global tech nonprofit that creates resources for survivors of gender-based violence in more than 14 languages, and it's all around the healing of survivors. I started that 10 years ago, and our resources are all online, free, and they are all open source and under the Creative Commons licenses. And it's things like helping survivors identify if they're in a manipulative relationship, helping them heal from sexual trauma. And we take a trauma-informed approach into designing these products. And survivors are part of our team, both in the form of volunteers and staff. So it is a truly global feminist sort of initiative in fighting against something that affects 1 in 3 women, and our resources are open to trans women and non-binary people as well.
Great.
I could go next. So I am the research lead and co-founder at Tattle. We generally work on tools and data sets to respond to inaccurate content as well as hate speech. So specifically around gender-based violence, we have this big project called Uri, which is currently a browser plugin that works in Indian, English, Hindi, and Tamil. But the focus is to build tools for protecting oneself as well as enabling collective response to online gender-based violence. The motivation for our project, comes from the disproportionate harassment that people of marginalized genders receive in the global south, specifically in India, but also the lack of safety tech in these languages. So earlier Shelley in the keynote was mentioning about the equity that you need in participation in AI by women, but there's also equity that we need in protecting people across language, across demographics, and protecting the most marginalized. And so that's where Tattle and Uli specifically aims to intervene.
Great, thank you both. So I've got to call out our shared South Asian heritage. So everybody on this panel hails from either India or Pakistan. And as we know, South Asia has, in a very small geographic area, relatively diverse languages, religions, cultures, everything, right? So we're like many, many countries in one subcontinent. And I think that's reflected in the work that both of you do. So both of you build solutions that are highly localized to different contexts, whether it's the language or it's the way that you frame your work, which is kind of opposed to a lot of what we see in the tech industry, which is often trying to build one thing and deploy it globally for everybody. So what are the challenges in working in this way? And then what are the opportunities you've seen in what you've built? Tarinima, you want to go first this time?
Sure. Yeah. So, Mala, like you rightly said, it is interesting that that this is a panel of folks from South Asia. I think building for India, we think the process is replicable. So, how we've approached the project or how we've approached Uli is to co-design the tool by consulting with activists and researchers, gender rights researchers, right? So, one of the things we realized was that a lot of activists and people who were actually at the receiving end of online gender-based violence felt that their views and their sort of experience was not being picked up by trust and safety teams at platforms. And so what we've done is gone to them and said, for example, why don't you tell us what are the slurs that are used to refer to your communities? And interestingly, depending on the region someone comes from, depending on the class, but also just across, for example, trans groups sometimes will feel that women's rights groups don't fully recognize the kind of abusive content or the kind of coded language that is used for them, right? And so there's a lot of complexity when you even within this broader field of gender-based violence. But I think working specifically in India, where there are 21 constitutionally recognized languages, also that people will use code mixed language. So they'll write Hindi, but in the Roman script. And I think it technically is a complex problem to solve. So there is that aspect of it. So I think in some ways, by tackling some of the harder problems first, you're also solving for a wider range of problems. But the flip side of it is that it is somewhat time consuming, and I think in a lot of ways we're always hitting at the edge of research, and like sort of struggling for approaches and ideas to implement and work through some of the problems that we encounter.
Thank you. Hera?
Yeah, I was just really enjoying Tarnuma's response and agree with a lot of it. So I started Chen, I was in the UK, but it was for Pakistani women everywhere in the world. So really, Chen started for the global south and then expanded from there. When I started just for Pakistan, when it went, when it went online, such a weird way of phrasing it, but when it was live, I was amazed at like it got views from like India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Iran, Brazil, and we didn't have a single word in Portuguese. Yet a lot of Brazilians were like flocking to it, and this content that was specifically for Pakistani women. So it made me realize there was this global gap in when it comes to like a decolonized approach to women's rights, because so much of what we have, and this is very true for tech as well, I think that we all use for example social media networks, but our experiences of that social, like of creating communities on those networks, will be different, and also the challenges we face. So So even though Chen is like a global organization, our work is global because our team of survivors come from across the world and they all work together to create these really diverse and relatable resources. We will get someone from Nigeria saying that, how many Nigerians do you have in your team? And at that particular time, we may not have any Nigerians in our team because our volunteers change. But they're surprised because they're like, well, I read your content and it just feels like it's written for me. It's because we take so much input from different experiences, and the way we approach the content creation, the tech production, all of that has like trauma informed design principles at the heart of it. So none of our products are finalized. They are co-created at every single stage with a very decolonized and sort of feminist approach. And I think that really shows in both our approach to our content.
Great, thank you both so much. So one thing I'm proud to say about our Tech for Social Good events is that we tend to, shockingly, convene highly technical audiences. Both of you are technologists, so I'd love to hear for the software developers, technical project managers, or basically anybody who works with code, what is one thing about your solutions that from a technical perspective is unique? Is it the methodology you use, the tech stack, the features? Like what would really engage somebody who works with code?
I can start. For the developers, the product designers, the user researchers who come to Chen and are very excited to join us, say that the thing that they like is the approach to the work, because it's tech focused. So it actually is working on gender-based violence, but it's all tech focused. But the way we think about tech is very different. So we approach it with care. Doesn't mean we approach it at the speed of being very slow, but it means that we take time when we need to, and we move fast when we have to. So we are able to hold both approaches in hand. And the fact that we think carefully about so many different, as an example, for user researchers in the room, we don't use personas in the way that you're used to using personas. Our personas are not amalgamations of lots of people into one. We have lots of personas. We look at stages of someone's experience within gender-based violence, and their particular needs. So we don't build caricatures of our users. For developers, we look at the tech stack that we're using has to be something that volunteers can tap into as well. So it has to be easy, very well documented. It has to be everlasting. So like our documentation has to be on point. And yeah, things like that. So I think just the approach that we take makes our work a very interesting place to experiment, explore, learn for people who've only worked in the commercial tech space.
Thanks. Yeah, Hera, again, I think just lots of things to bounce off from your answer as well. So yeah, again, as Hera said, I think the approach to our work is going to be different, and it is possibly refreshing for someone who has worked on tech in a commercial space, but also I think even within the open source world, so all of that is work, including Uli, is open source. But even within that, the focus on intersectional approaches and feminist approaches, I think, can be different. And so, for example, the way the machine learning model is built, and also the way the data set was generated, what was annotated, it came from a lot of consultation. It landed up taking almost 9 months for us to come up with a rubric for annotation, just because we were getting so much pushback from the activists in terms of what we were asking them to annotate. And when we were saying, is this abuse or not abuse, what they thought, is very different from, say, how a computer scientist would think of abuse. So I mean, that's just one very clear way where it shows up in the machine learning model. But I think just throughout and all the features that have been built in, I think there's just a lot of feedback. And what we're saying is it is a bottom-up approach um, to moderation as a challenge. So Uli works on a user's browser that opens a whole sort of range of ways of looking at moderation, or that is beyond just the divide between free speech and safety that we land up hearing about when it comes to platforms. We've heard things about saying that, I want the ability to, instead of redacting tweets, can I replace it with, say, a unicorn? Can I replace it with a rainbow, right? And so I think there are all these flexibilities that come up when you are looking at a tool that's working on the user's end. We're very particular about data minimalism, and so we collect as little data, user data, as possible. We want the plugin to be free but also accessible, and for anyone to be able to use it without worrying about you know them being identified or their data being shared. And so those are some of the other principles that we've adhered to quite strictly. So yeah, I think just in terms of the approaches, it can be a fairly interesting way of looking at tech.
Great, thank you both so much. I think I learned more about just modeling for women's equity in AI and data models in the past 5 minutes than I've learned in my entire career. So thank you for that. So I'm going to guess that there's a lot of overlap with this last question, but for the non-technical audiences, for the people who don't interact with code, what is something unique that you want to let the audience know about?
Yeah, sure. So for people who are not developers, there's so much that you can do, both in terms of, looking at, I think all of us need to be better informed about the tech that we interact with and how it impacts us, all the way from, like Taranoma said, AI models to our experiences within social media platforms. For Chen in particular, we really believe that safety by design and like our trauma-informed design principles should be incorporated in how tech products are created. So we follow those principles ourselves, and you don't need a developer to kind of get engaged in it. We also apply them to the way we run our organization in terms of HR. We apply them to the way we write content. We get a lot of great feedback on the language we use. So if you're interested in like how do you speak in a way online that someone feels like they're sitting with you and that they're receiving support from you, or you're interested in using imagery and how you use imagery to create trust and hope. I'm all about hope, and so is Jen. So yeah, please have a look at us. If you want to volunteer, if any of you want to donate, please, that would be great as well. And also, if you're an organization that wants to learn about these practices, then get in touch, because we deliver a lot of trainings too.
So on the non-technical side, I think the Uli as a project is so intertwined with how people use social media and what their experience of harassment can be. And so a lot of the interaction actually and a lot of the work is non-technical. There's a lot of translation work. So if, for example, you're someone who understands, say, code as well as law, that's fantastic, because one of the features with Uli is the ability to archive online content. And when does archived content actually stand in the court of law? That's an open question. Even on the user research side, what is the point of frustration for people? It can get as specific as what variant of the machine learning model is a better experience, but it can also be more broad in terms of just the appearance of the plugin on different platforms. So there's user research side, and then also that one of the needs that we had heard, which was quite surprising for us through the focus group discussions, was that a lot of the community guidelines for social media platforms are not available in the dominant languages. And so you'd have millions of people speaking these languages, but the community support portals are just not in those languages. And so we've translated and illustrated guides. And so any support on illustrations, translations, I think those would be really, really helpful as well. So spanning research, user research, policy-esque work, I think the range of tasks is really varied.
Great, thank you both so much. All right, well, that concludes panel 2. We'll see you both here in a few minutes for the panel Q&A. What would the world look like if 50,000 more GitHub users contributed to social good projects? That's what Tech for Social Good is trying to answer through our new initiative, Activating Developers. So we know from extensive research in our Tech for Social Good, especially our research on open source software for social good, that it's time-consuming, often expensive, and difficult work to successfully engage external contributors on GitHub social good projects. So in the coming year, we're going to be launching new programs and projects under Activating Developers to support those who do this critical work to help us create more social good opportunities on GitHub and to reach that long-term goal of 50,000 users. So today I'm excited to announce our first program, an open source community manager program to support 7 current and planned digital public goods. As many of you know, digital public goods are open source software that align with the Sustainable Development Goals and have taken steps to do no harm. Among the 7 digital public goods we're supporting are software development projects from Hera's organization, Chain, and Tarunima's product, Uli, which you just heard about a few seconds ago in our last panel. Our other supported digital public goods are Social Income, Uwazi, ifme.org, OpenFisca, and Open Terms Archive. So we're looking to engage one open source community manager program for each of the 7 digital public goods. And the overall goal of engaging these community managers will be to reduce barriers for external GitHub contributors to the digital public good. The open source community managers will do things like grow and support online communities, manage GitHub issues, discussions, and project boards, support with general project management, and help onboard new contributors. Applications for the open source community manager program will open on Monday, March 13th, so this coming Monday, and we highly, highly encourage people who identify as women to apply, especially those who have worked in the social sector on thematic issues related to the 7 digital public goods. As part of the program, we're offering a free training, so we welcome people who have limited or even no experience on GitHub, and this is a really great way to get involved in the tech industry if you want to kind of bridge that gap from the social sector, or if you're coming from the tech industry and have the tech skills already and want to work more on social sector causes. You'll find the application on our website at this link on Monday, and it'll only take a few minutes to apply. And so with that, we'll turn back to our panel Q&A so we can bring up. Okay, great. Are there any questions from our live audience, first of all?
Hi, thank you so much for hosting. My question is around when we talk about SDG goals in intersection with social impact, why is there so much polarization for ESG companies or for ESG standards for different types of companies to actually adopt these standards?
I think I'll talk briefly about that. I think one reason would be perhaps the lack of support in the infrastructure in the area that you are working, or the government. For example, when we talk about Afghanistan and the work that we do, gender equality, for example, is one of the SDGs, or education, and economic empowerment. These are like some of the core elements of the work that we do and we want to implement. But sadly, in the environment that we are operating, a lot of these situations and issues, either from the let's say the government aspects, or because it's a conflict war zone area, or because of the lack of infrastructure, right? For a technical education, you need electricity, you need laptops, you need internet, and these are like a lot of the factors and elements that make it much more difficult, even if the governments or companies are committed to make that happen, to make the process so slow. Talking about our work, for example, infrastructure is a big issue. Even if we want to commit to get as many as girls we can to get online education and job, but sometimes our students have only 2 or 3 hours electricity per day. Majority of our students don't have laptops or internet. So lack of resources, I think, can be one of those elements that make it much more difficult for the people to really implement. And it will take a lot of time, to tackle those infrastructural issues.
Great, thank you. Any questions from our in-person attendees? Here we go.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Elsa. Nice to meet you all, and thank you for your time here today. I think oftentimes when we think about women's equity, it seems like such an overwhelming challenge, and it can sometimes be demoralizing to look at the whole picture. So the thing I love about the panel is that you're looking at it from such different points of view, but I'm curious about how you think about measuring success when it is just such a big issue.
Maybe Stephanie.
Sure, I'll kick us off in this regard. Thank you for your question. So you're right. Measurement is a challenge, and measurement, particularly of any social sector intervention, but especially for looking at gender gap, is really challenging. And that's because of the social context that primarily, right, that we don't have disaggregated data, as I mentioned, for a lot of really key measures of success, right? If you're a company, or if you're an intervention and you're implementing something new and you want to understand how successful this was without having just the baseline sort of understanding of what the context is in a given moment within a locality at a local level, a regional level, and then at a national level, it's really hard to know how much of a change you've made, right? And measuring that impact. So that's really where it starts from a measurement perspective, is that without having that foundation at a local, regional, and national, and then international level, it can be really hard. But with that being said, I think technology is again sort of leapfrogging over a lot of these challenges with having access to open data, being able to access different proxy sort of data points for being able to measure success that is now global because we're all using social media, we're all using all of these other tools. Is really helpful for helping us all understand how we're as a world, right? How we're progressing along. So those are some of the proxies that are being used for measuring success.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, I think you've brought up this point a couple times, and I do think it's kind of a tell-all that the UN historically hasn't been the best at getting double disaggregated data, so even getting that intersectional lens is extremely challenging. But sometimes it's not present in the quantitative data, but we do see that in qualitative means, and I think one of the ways is really the communities that we build. So Hera, and I think for Torunima as well, and even Ify, can you talk to us about open source community engagement when it comes to these issues, whether it's gender-based violence or online harassment and bullying? What do the communities really mean? What have they been able to kind of fill when the data isn't there, or when the media attention is not necessarily there? What do the communities do? Hera, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think that the open source communities have been really good at building alternative platforms. What I think we've been not so good at has been how to sustain them, and not having had to rely on large tech giants to buy us out, so that those tools are then
Says in
incorporated.
Microsoft.
Yep. Sorry, but there are loads of examples like that. Or those tools being disaggregated, like the amount of open source tools that are no longer in use because of that, or that those nonprofits had to wind down because they didn't have the funding to continue working. I think this is a very precarious area where, as a community, we need to do something more about that. I also think we're very good at responsive action, which is, someone spots something isn't working and people jump on it, people fix it, people hack through it, and there's a huge momentum around it. What we're not good at is creating those long-term, like alternatives. So when I was when I started Chen, and I was like, yes, I was part of the open source community. So for me, it was so natural to have Chen, all of Chen's work being open source. I got so much love from the open source like community in general, globally. But what I found interesting over the years is that getting people to reuse the work has been really hard. And it's like there's a lot of enthusiasm, but getting like the reuse part, we just have not like cracked that yet. So I take responsibility as like a feminist technologist that I've not been able to work through that challenge of how do I like get that reuse, hopefully through this new GitHub program for the community managers. This might be something that we can crack, but I'm just saying, like, holding my hand up, that's where I feel like I've also failed as being part of the community, that I haven't been able to convince other nonprofits, other tech companies to be like, why don't you reuse this, build off this?
Yes, very good points. Thank you so much. If there are any questions online, then feel free to post them in the chat and we'll make sure to get to those as well. I did want to ask Ify, so the Nigerian tech scene is really booming in the past decade or so. Can you tell us one thing you love about being a software engineer in Nigeria, and what is one thing that you would like to improve?
Okay, yeah. So what I've enjoyed hugely in Nigeria, it's one thing, being part of the community. We have a whole lot of community that actually care for us. They're actually very supportive, right? And that actually helped me well in my career journey. I can't actually tell my success story without mentioning community. Community played a huge role in my career, and we've seen a lot of new communities coming out, helping people from underrepresented group. And this is like a huge thing for us, because there are people that cannot actually start off this journey of tech without the help of community. So community has been there providing resources, providing maybe stipend for data for students, helping students to attend meetups, for people that don't have a financial capacity to actually travel from one place to another, right? And in my work as a software engineer, right, we've actually we have also like a community where we help each other as well, right? Which make it very easy for us to actually kind of transition into another team. So the bottom line there is that community has played a huge role in our life here in Nigeria, and we've been able to kind of address some issues that usually come up in terms of gender bias, discrimination, and sexual harassment. We have most community here has a detailed code of conduct that you have to follow, you have to abide with, and they don't take that lightly. They are always there to support everyone, to provide anything. And we also also extending thanks to the other people that actually contribute financially, resource wise. We've seen there is this community that one time they received laptop donation from people in US and other parts of the country. So this kind of support is what we've been getting here in Nigeria, and that's we greatly appreciate. That actually has been part of my success story.
Karunima, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, actually, if that's okay, I actually wanted to respond to the previous questions.
Sure.
I've
Yeah.
been mulling on the responses. So so I wanted to address both just the idea of how do you evaluate success in a field like this, and then also just what open source means. So I am channeling the work of a lot of people, and so not a lot of these ideas are not mine. So this was specifically the qualitative researcher who worked on this project, identified that what a lot of people were experiencing on social media as a result of this perpetual harassment was just this notion of fatigue, right? It wasn't so much this sort of sense of violence. I think what we identified was this just general sense of exhaustion, and this idea that you have to be cautious because anything you say might lead to a backlash. And how you evaluate that in the long run, I think, as Mala, I mean, in the short run, it is qualitative data. We have, some data on, for example, how many installs you have, what features people are using. But I think ultimately to draw a causal impact and say, did this make the social media experience less fatiguing, I think is going to be going to be challenging, but really what we would want to get to. And then the sort of fallout of that is that does it lead to greater participation in political and professional spaces? And again, I think drawing causal impacts in a space like this is going to be very complicated. But yeah, in the meantime, we do have some qualitative evidence we fall back on. I think the other bit that I was just thinking about, the sort of consistent translations we have to do between the technical team as well as the gender rights groups and activists. And I think it's important to remember that open source as a term means a lot to technologists, and it's not necessarily the primary value that drives a lot of grassroots organizations and a lot of activists, right? And so they're not going to, just because something is open, that doesn't mean it's by default collaborative for them. And so I think the burden is often on technologists, and it's also often, I mean, it's effort on both sides to actually values of that to a lot of the organizations, right? And that often means the people we are working with are not necessarily on social media. You have to call them and talk to them, right? And so you're trying to work on fairly complicated tech concepts with a lot of people who are affected by technology but are not, sort of very well versed with it. And I think that's the effort we all have to put in to make open source in that sense really accessible to everybody.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, I think the point you made is something that we bring up a lot in our research. Just because something is open doesn't mean it's equal. It takes a lot of work to make something equal. So I commend both of you for really thinking about that first. Okay, so maybe we can just do a quick 30-second rapid fire. I've got a slide up here with links for all of the organizations. So please, Tarunima, you want to start? Just tell us what these links are and what people can do with them.
Great. I can't see the slides, but generally the Uli slide is uli.tattle.co.in. I'm going to put all of this in the chat. You can sponsor the repository. There's a GitHub sponsors page. We're also open to just generally, we have a project roadmap on GitHub as well. So you can look at exactly what's happening in the immediate future. There's a longer roadmap, which is a 2-year roadmap. So if you want to contribute code, Or if you want to contribute with money, please reach out or just find us on GitHub. It shall take you to, yeah, code or money. Both of those channels are on GitHub. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Fideshta?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested to support us in any capacity, please feel free to reach out. I think that's our website and our email address. So we are happy and excited to explore any opportunity with you.
Great, thank you. Hera?
Please, if you want to volunteer, whether as a writer, researcher, product person, developer, we have a big volunteering program. It's very flexible, but also requires commitment. If you want to donate money, you can do that through the GitHub Sponsors Program. If you work at an organization that could benefit from our expertise, please do that. And really, most of all, if you know anyone who's experiencing gender-based violence and would really benefit from a resource that's free online and is about their healing, please, please, please share Jen's work with them.
Okay, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you. So the Merle Center has a repository, a couple of repositories on GitHub, and we have 2 issues that we would really love some developer help on. So that's just very practical, right, for our developers out there. And then secondly, Merle Center is primarily geared at sort of the intersection between social sciences, research, data science. And so if you're interested in data science, if you're interested in human-centered design, which is one of the topics we focused on, we'd love to continue building our community as we write and as we ideate on like what kind of guidance would be helpful for the social sector, as well as what case studies would be helpful, right, for learning across the board. And it's all done through our open source community. So that's the other way that you can get involved. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you want to go ahead quickly, Ify?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we are hugely in need of volunteers, and we also welcome any financial support as well.
All right, well, I want to thank you all again for attending this event. Thank you so much to our panelists, Fideshta, Ify, Stephanie, Hera, Tarunima. Your work is amazing. I know you all are super, super busy, so thank you all for being here today. Again, thank you to our audience, both here in person and virtual. Please do take a screenshot or a photo of the slide to get involved, and we'll also send out the links probably on Monday. I want to thank our colleagues here at the Microsoft UN Affairs Office for hosting us. And last but certainly not least, thank you to my GitHub colleagues, of course, Shelly, Caffrey, Nakaya, Cynthia, Victoria, and everyone who pitched in to make this event possible. So as mentioned before, this is the first of 2 events we're hosting for CSW 67. Be sure to check out our second event, Women in Open Source in Life Sciences, on Thursday, March 16th at 11 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. You can scan the QR code or go to this link on the slide to find the registration link. And then lastly, remember our Open Source Community Manager program opens on Monday, March 13th. You'll find more information about the program and the application form on our website, socialimpact.github.com. Thank you all so much for coming, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.